I'm Jon Canzano. You can find my work at joncanzano.com. He's Jon Wilner. Find him at wilnerhotline.com. Like and subscribe as well. Make sure you like and subscribe. Wilner, before we get forward thinking, let's look in the rearview mirror. We had Softy from KJR in Seattle on the show last week. What'd you think of the interview with Softy?
Always entertaining, loads of insight, off the charts. Like his passion is an 11, like in the Spinal Tap volume meter. Gotta love it. And I think it's a worthwhile show the week of the Oregon-Washington game. It's such an important rivalry out west, and he's in the middle of it. So, yeah, I thought it was great. How about you?
Yeah, I thought it was good, and then I got to see him at the game. I saw him at the Husky Stadium, and so Oregon had, just pretty much put Washington in a chokehold and suffocated Washington during the game. And, Softy's walking around after the game going, they're not that good. They're not that good. I don't think they're that good. Not impressed. But it was a fun episode. Softy in doses. That's what I say. You can't, he's kind of like, a hot fudge sundae. You just can't do that every day.
Yes.
Every once in a while, though, terrific. So good stuff to have him on. The comments in last week's video were phenomenal. You want to dive in there a little bit and share some of the comments?
Just a sampling. 30 minutes in, and Softy seems to be completely unaware of Oregon injuries. Softy, do your homework. What a chump.
The haters.
Yeah, the haters. Softy is such a tool. Phil Knight just gave $2 billion to cancer research. What else do we have here? Baghdad. Softy is Baghdad Bob. Ted Bundy was a Husky. Another Ted Bundy was a Husky.
That's true. Absolutely. It happens to be true.
Sounds like Softy's making a lot of excuses. Softy is a poor representation of UW fans, and I don't like UW fans. I had no idea that Pee Wee Herman's dad was a Husky honk. That's a little bit of a representative sample. Softy is here's another chump. Basically he was doing his job.
Yeah. He riled up the fans. Thin stripe of people just angry all the time, but Softy's tends to be a lightning rod in that way.
Yep.
Look, I was at the game.
You were at the game, yeah.
Yeah, I never for a moment thought that Oregon was going to lose that game. And that's the rarest of things. You go into that game thinking, oh gosh, it's a little dicey. There was no point of that game, Wilner, where I looked at Oregon and went, oh, they're in jeopardy of losing. I think defensively, they just had Damon Williams Jr. bottled up.
Yep.
Washington looked very limited.
Yep.
Oregon didn't play its best game, but it was just it was like a submission hold in a UFC fight. Like, Washington tapped out and that was that. And I think they play that game 10 times. I think Oregon probably wins at 10, 9 or 10. Yep. And then Dan Lanning after the game, this is a very different scene than maybe, his visit, when Kalen DeBoer was the coach. Lanning's running around the stadium, kind of high-fiving Duck fans like he owns the place. Like, Oregon feeling very good about itself after that game.
Yep. And should be, secure the playoff spot. And we can get into that in a minute. But I watched it kind of thinking a lot like you did. Especially in the second half, just never got the sense Washington could win the game. And that's exactly how I felt watching the Huskies play Ohio State and Michigan as well. And all three games, almost the exact same score. Washington lost them all by double digits. Not that competitive down the stretch. And the common theme, the Huskies can't move the ball well enough. They can't score, right? They scored a total of 27 points against Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon. 0 for 3 against ranked teams, all double-digit losses, grand total of 27 points. I don't put it all on Jed Fish and the play calling. I know Washington fans are upset about that. I don't think their offensive line is good enough to move the ball on the ground to protect Williams, enough against that level of defense. They got to get better on the offensive line. They could use some more receivers. Williams certainly needs to get better from the pocket. They are a work in progress. I think that they've gained a little bit of ground on the Ducks in the last year, but they're still a level behind the top teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're passable. And we talked about the tiering in the Big Ten.
Yes.
That those top tier programs, and you're talking about the top tier programs that dominated Washington physically. I felt like Damon Williams Jr., his eyes were down for the game. He was looking at Oregon's front seven. He wasn't looking downfield. And I think some of that is he took some shots early in the game. He absolutely got hammered, a couple of times early in the first half. And I thought, he really wasn't looking to make plays like, you see him in the games against Maryland and Rutgers and others. So, from that standpoint, I think Oregon had better players. Oregon also was injured. I think this is a wake-up call for Washington. If you want to be in that top tier, you've got to go get better players.
Yeah.
They need to get bigger. They need to get more physical. Oregon looked like a Big Ten team. Washington looked like a Pac-12 team. That's the best way I can put it.
They still do look more like – that's right. They still do look more like a Pac-12 team. And that kind of team was good enough to win the Pac-12.
Yes.
It is not good enough to beat Michigan and Ohio State with the regularity you need in the Big Ten. For sure. And they got to get better on the road. They just generally have got a lot of work to do. And it appears that Jedd Fisch is going to be back to do that work next year, given the hirings that are taking place elsewhere. I'm not sure how many Husky fans are thrilled about that. I put out a poll on Twitter, I guess it was Friday, saying, basically, if they beat Oregon, is he in play for the Florida job? It's his alma mater. So I asked Husky fans, which would you rather, beat Oregon and lose Jedd Fisch, or lose to Oregon and keep Jedd Fisch? And overwhelmingly, they said beat Oregon and lose Jedd Fisch, which I thought was kind of telling.
Yeah, the game more important than the long-term vision of the coach. And I think that matches what Softy said in our interview. Like he sort of had this what will be mentality after losing Kalen DeBoer, after losing Chris Peterson. I think Washington fans are going, okay, we get it. This is how it's going to be. But if you want to join that upper tier, I think Washington's got to spend more. I think they need to invest more. I think I looked at Oregon's players. I think Oregon was just better at a number of positions that matter. And I don't think Washington, you say they closed the gap a little bit, but I mean, I didn't feel like Oregon had to play its best game, anywhere near their best game. And they still win by double digits on the road. I kind of worried a little bit from a Husky standpoint if it could go, could it be 4 or 5 years before Washington wins one of these again? How long will it be? I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. If you remove the 2-year upturn under Chris Peterson, 2016, 17, and then the 2 years under DeBoer, Washington hasn't beaten the Oregon in the last 18, 20 years. All their wins have come in those two clusters of 2-year upticks. And the Ducks have been building for this era of college football for many, many years. And they are perfectly designed from top to bottom to thrive in the era of rev share and NIL and transfer portal. And Dan Lanning is the right guy to be pulling the strings. And Washington, they certainly have got work to do.
A lot going on in college football, the Lane Kiffin drama. Ooh. Nobody should be surprised by what Lane Kiffin did, right?
Nobody.
I mean, come on.
Nope, not at all. It's like that. He's like that guy in the Seinfeld episode, the bad breaker-upper, right? There was no way it was going to, the guy gets stabbed by the ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
There was no way it was going to end in any other fashion beside Kiffin making everybody involved, wanting his cake and your cake and everybody else's cake.
Yeah. Selfish.
And making the profession look bad. I mean, the guy, you leave your playoff bound team for a rival that's not in the playoff. And then you want to try to stay and coach. And then recruit your players to the rival. Just bananas, but very lame.
I don't blame Mississippi fans for going to the airport and giving him the double birds on his way out of town. I mean, look, he could have stayed there. He could have negotiated a raise. He could have been well paid. He could have sat back and said, see, look, I've changed. I've evolved. But psychologists will tell you the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. The guy ends badly everywhere. And guess what, LSU? That's your story next.
Yes.
It'll become I'm just loving that part of it. The LSU fans are going, well, this is just a business. Let's get back to the LSU fan here in about 4 or 5 seasons when Lane Kiffin's gone to the NFL and he's ditched them, or he's gone to some other program and ditched them. because it will happen there as well. He, it's sad. It's not good for the game. It's not good for college football to have coaches right before the playoff bracket is finalized, coaches bailing. That's not good. It's not good for the sport. I think, Ole Miss is doing the right thing by pushing them out, get out of the way. You can't stay here and recruit coaches and players while you're trying to coach the team. But it's really unfortunate because think about the Ole Miss fan. That's a fan that, when Lane Kiffin took over, that was a 5-win team. And that's a fan that is living like the Washington fans 2 years ago, living their best life.
Yep.
This should be special. There should be little kids all over, Mississippi going, this is the greatest thing ever. And instead, the story is this coach who is essentially the scorpion riding across the frog as it crosses the river going, I'm not going to sting you. I'm not going to sting you. Guess what? Frog got stung. Lane Kiffin. Why? Because he's a scorpion. This is what he does. And I also had an industry, longtime college athletics, administrator reach out to me. And I said, what do you think of Lane Kiffin? They said, born on third base and thought he hit a triple. Like, you think, look at his story. Yeah. And it's just kind of smarmy. And it's just, it's very easy to root against. And I think LSU is going to have a lot of the country rooting against it in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see how he deals with all of the LSU political and administrative chaos. I mean, everything there is much worse than it is in Oxford. I did see, there's a lot of bitching and moaning on social media about how the Kiffin situation reflects this completely screwed up calendar and college football has got it all wrong. And I'm just thinking, no, do these folks realize that the college football calendar is set because of the higher education calendar, right? You can't transfer in February in the middle of the semester. You got to enroll when classes start in January. That helps set the transfer portal, which sets the coaching carousel and the recruiting. You can't, unless you pull football out of the higher education umbrella and let these guys exist, as for-profit in a for-profit business environment where they don't have the academic commitments. There's no way you can adopt something similar to the NFL where free agency is after the playoff.
Unless you move the season forward
but you have to move it way forward.
Move it way forward.
Which I'm in favor of, but then the problem there is you're going to abandon your bowl tradition on New Year's Day. Yeah. Because in order to move it up enough, you'd have to play the championship game essentially at the Rose Bowl on January 1st.
Yes.
Who wouldn't want that, right?
Yeah, love that.
And the sugar and the orange and the cotton and the peach and the fiesta. Are you playing those games on December 20th?
Yeah. You'd have to,
but they're not going to do that.
I think eventually they get there because I think that is the more reasonable, doable solution, because splitting away from the institutions themselves, I think that's so complex. It's rife with problems, but I think the solution is to move it forward. But the problem is, Wilner, when are we playing games? Playing games in July? Like, what are we doing here?
They have to open up week 0 for everybody to play. You have to get rid of the conference championship game. So that kind of creates 2 extra weeks there. But if you expand the playoff to 16, then you're talking about, it's going to be 4 rounds. If you go to 24, it's another weekend. It's hard to get everything in. They'd be better off moving it forward too, because you get out of the way of the NFL playoffs.
Yes.
I think that's a battle that college football can never win, but it's just such a heavy lift and takes so many competing factions to all agree that I just can't see how it ever happens.
Yeah, and you watch coaches like Lane Kiffin leave. Just wait until a starting quarterback leaves a playoff team and says, I have to go and I have to get in the portal, and I need to be healthy for my next team. That stuff's coming. We've seen backups do it. Just wait. Just wait for that. Look, the coaching carousel has been spinning. Got new coaches all over the place. Where do you want to start that conversation?
Well, let's start. Why don't we start in your hood? Okay. Your hood. What do you think?
Oregon
Jamarcus
State.
Shepard, Oregon State. They finally got a coach.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, look, they looked at Tim Polasak from North Dakota State. They looked at Brent Vegan from Montana State. Jamarcus Shepard was the third finalist. Scott Barnes, the AD at Oregon State, only wanted 2 finalists. He ended up with 3. This is one of these cases where you and I both agree we don't like committees. But Barnes did not want to hire a coordinator to be his head coach. He did that with Trent Bray. He wanted somebody who had head coaching experience. The committee loved Jamarcus Shepard. They knocked it out of the park. They passed him through. They made Barnes interview him as a finalist. I think if Scott Barnes had his way, he would have hired Brent Vegan at Montana State or Tim Polasak at North Dakota State and felt like that was a more secure hire. Jamarcus Shepard's got risk. It comes with risk. He's never done it. He's got great enthusiasm. He'll recruit. He fought for the right things in the 11th hour. I am told that he fought for a general manager. He's bringing a person from Alabama with him to be his GM at Oregon State. Scott Barnes did not want to give him a GM. He got the GM. I think that was a big win for Jamarcus Shepard. But, he's got higher ceiling and a lower floor. And the risk here for Oregon State in this conference, a conference that has Jim Mora in it now, conference that's got, Boise State and San Diego State with Sean Lewis. There's some good coaches in this conference, and Jamarcus Shepard better be on his game.
He better be on his game. It also just sounds to me like Oregon State not aligned. The different factions involved. I guess Barnes now has some cover. If it doesn't work out, right, he can say, well, there's a committee. But you just wonder, until there's some real alignment at the top there, if he's got a real chance to succeed. And I agree with you. It's a big risk.
Yeah, and there's uncertainty in the conference itself, right? If you're Jim Mora going to Colorado State, you're looking around going, okay, this is new. What is going on in this conference? But at Oregon State, you also have, Barnes. There's a lot of smoke around his job, and so the fans are not happy with him because of how Trent Bray went and the men's basketball situation with Wayne Tinkle, and so. I think in his interviews, Jamarcus Shepard asked 2 really good questions. He asked about Barnes. Are you going to be here? Yep. What is your job status? Are you going to be around? The second thing was in the negotiation. And this is why Thanksgiving morning, Thanksgiving afternoon, you still didn't have like a confirmation that Oregon State had a hire. Shepard's agent was pushing Oregon State to include that GM position on the staff. They were adamant that if he was going to take the job, he needed the GM. I liked that. Because it suggests the guy's that's a CEO mentality, right? I need somebody on my staff. So I like that part of it. Nobody's rooting against him, Wilner. But, there's a risk here. He's never done it. And Trent Bray hadn't done it. But I can tell you, he'll go and, he'll win news conferences. He's a big personality, and he's hungry to make this work.
The GM is important, too, because, the blueprint for Oregon State has not changed. They got to identify diamonds in the rough, just like Jonathan Smith did, and Mike Riley before him, right? Whether it's high school or transfer, diamonds in the rough. And the more experienced, savvy eyeball Shepard's got helping him with that, the better chance he's got to succeed.
I kind of wonder too, I do know that the staff that he is sort of putting together, they were already working over the weekend. On Sunday, they were reaching out to a number of high school coaches in the region who, had recruits that were potentially available. They were trying to do some assessment of the class that, wants to sign. Kenny Wheaton's kid, Kai Wheaton, wants to sign at Oregon State. He wants to, he's already committed. He wants to be an early entrant guy. He's a 3-star defensive back. I know Kai Wheaton was trying to get in touch with Jamarcus Shepard because he wants to come, but, it's a scramble right now. And I think we've watched this at a number of places. I watched Dan Lanning even do it at Oregon, as he was leaving Alabama, Jamarcus Shepard, Lanning was leaving Georgia. They were trying to compete for a national championship. And while Lanning's trying to put together the roster, right? So it's a real interesting lift in year one and a very important year for Oregon State. What do you think about Mora to Colorado State?
I think that's a great hire by the Rams. Great hire. And my understanding is Mora was looking at other jobs, right? I think he wanted to get involved in the Bay Area jobs. But I think it's it's a little bit like Dion. I mean, certainly he's not anywhere close to Dion in terms of personality, popularity, all that kind of thing. But, it's the kind of hire that is going to get attention from everywhere across the country in the college football world. And I also wonder if Colorado State saw how successful Dion was in elevating the profile of the CU football program and thought, you know what, Mora might elevate our profile because he's a former NFL coach who's known from coast to coast. He's won, he just did a great job at UConn. He won at UCLA when he was there for a few years. He knows what he's doing. My only question, I guess, is the energy level, given how many jobs he's now been through.
Yeah.
But I'd give Colorado State, an A, if not an A+ for that.
I think Oregon State was looking at him as well. I know that they at least informally talked with him. If not, maybe the committee gave him an interview, but they were impressed. And look, if you go back to Dan Guerrero at UCLA, he didn't want to hire Jim Mora when he hired him. Mora went into that interview and killed. He is charismatic. He will be able to raise funds. You have a valid question about, he's 64 years old. You have a valid question about his energy level, of course, but looks to me like he was dead set on getting to the western part of the United States. He was kind of trying to get into that Stanford job. He was trying to get into Oregon State, got into the Colorado State mix. I think John Weber, the AD at Colorado State, made a really good hire there.
Yeah, all of these hires, and Stanford too, going with Tavita Pritchard, the former quarterback. So much of it now is you've got to energize your constituents because the outside NIL is so important within the business community. And, Colorado State, they got, the metropolitan Denver area, they got a lot of alums. And I would have to think that the Mora hire is going to really spark some interest in the program and in funding the program through outside NIL. That is such a huge piece of the hiring process right now.
Yeah. Jonathan Smith, meanwhile, out at Michigan State. They will go to Pat Fitzgerald. Michigan State owes Jonathan Smith $33 million. Goodwill jokes aside, this was a case where you and I mean, we saw this, didn't we? Jonathan Smith was in a rush to get out of Corvallis.
Yes.
Any port in the storm, as they say.
Yep.
He got out. I think it was a really bad fit. It was a clumsy, awkward fit. I did talk to some of the assistants on Smith's staff in the last few weeks. I said, what is it like to be there? They said awkward silence as it was leading towards the firing. It's almost like, you're done. And, even it doesn't really matter what you do. It's a matter of time. I found it really interesting, but we talked about this. If he had just been a little more patient, I think he's at Washington right now, as in not Jed Fish, or he's at UCLA instead of Deshaun Foster. If he had just been a little more patient, it's why the timing of these moves are so important. And sometimes it works out. You look at Brent Brennan at Arizona. It just worked out that Brennan didn't get the Oregon State job. He was the runner-up to Trent Bray. He ends up saying, I got to go back to San Jose State. Instead, Arizona opens.
Yeah.
And it's just the dominoes fall. It happens every year. It's crazy. There's nothing like college football this time of year.
There's a lot of sliding doors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can get back into the Washington thing. What if Oregon wins one of those two games or both of those games in 2023? Is DeBoer not the head coach at Alabama? And how are things different in the Pacific Northwest if he's still in Seattle? It's crazy, and we're seeing it more and more because the leashes are shorter for the ADs, for the coaches, for the presidents. The turnover is greater, pressure to win and generate money is greater, and it's not going to stop. We get the closer we get to 2030s, and the turnover in the media rights contract cycles and the threat of the Super League, it's just going to make everything even more chaotic.
Yeah. And I think, look, the Pac-12 is on this mission to rebuild and reconstitute, and they'll launch next year, and they'll play, an unusual schedule probably in football where they may do some scheduling crossover. They may play a home and home, but, they're trying to find some traction. And I'm looking around at the coaches in the conference, and I'm going Sean Lewis and Spencer Danielson and Jim Mora. And, you've better be on it because, there's some good coaches in that conference right now. Entz at Fresno State, really good job in his first season there. You know,
Bronco Mendenhall.
Bronco Mendenhall, great job by him. You know, it's I think the Pac-12, you know, and you compare it to the American, we could talk about that for a second here. The Americans had a great year, phenomenal year. But I kind of wonder about 2026, and will they take a step back with so many coaches? They have a lot of turnover there, and it feels to me like the Pac-12 is surging towards 26.
Yeah, the American, by my count, has lost 4 coaches, I think, at this point. North Texas, Eric Morris went to Oklahoma State. USF, Alex Golesh is going to Arkansas. No. He's going to Auburn.
Yeah.
Ryan Silverfield, Memphis, is going to Arkansas. And John Summerall from Tulane is going to Florida. So they've lost 4 of their best coaches. Kind of creates an opportunity for the new Pac-12, which should have a little bit more stability. But it's the same thing in the American that happened to Oregon State losing Smith.
Yes.
Washington State losing Jake Dickert. Washington State losing Cam Ward and Materia. Everybody wants to move up, right? Players want to move up. Coaches want to move up. And if you win, there's a better chance of that happening. And then you kind of have to backfill. And right now, the American's going to backfill, and we'll see how the Pac-12 does.
Yeah, and I'm watching that because that chaos in the American certainly could benefit the Pac-12. This was the Americans' year, right? This is their year to grab that playoff spot and position themselves. 26 eyes on the Pac-12 to see what they can do. Certainly, Boise State had a disappointing season this year. They still find themselves in the Mountain West Championship game because the computer picked them. I wouldn't have picked them, but Boise State's getting in there. You know, a lot still to be determined on the Pac-12 front. We'll be all over it right here on this podcast.
Yeah, and before we go, right, we should mention the American is the front runner for that G5 spot, right? The winner of the North Texas Tulane game, probably going to get that G5 playoff spot, which is so coveted. And we got the playoffs. The penultimate playoff standings are coming out tomorrow, Tuesday evening, and it's going to be real interesting. You know, we'll have a ton to talk about next time we get together, but will be real interesting to see how the committee positions certain teams against each other. Miami versus Notre Dame. You know, where's Texas Tech going to be? In Oregon. Oregon is on track for the sweetest spot there is, the number 5 seed, hosting a game in the opening round, advancing to play hosting the American probably champion, and then advancing to play number 4, which might be Texas Tech. If you're a Duck fan, you got the worst draw possible last year. Number 1, having to play Ohio State. This year, you couldn't end up with the best draw possible. Yeah, you do it by not winning your conference.
I know, and that's and I kind of wonder that, you know, if secretly Dan Lanning and his staff, after they lost to Indiana, went, okay, this is okay.
Yes.
This is how it works out. This is part of the journey. Look at what Ohio State did a year ago, losing twice. We can do that too. I also think that there's going to be one of the stories that I think is going to come out in the next 2 weeks. People are going to be talking about are those first round buys. Because the idea was that those first round buys, when the original bracket came out, the idea was they went to conference champions who were playing for conference championships. But there's a potential here for some teams that are not in conference championship games, Wilner, to receive a first round buy when the final rankings come out. That is a long layoff. You know, goes beyond the 19 or 20 or 22, 24 days that we've talked about. That could be really problematic for somebody. I don't like the buys. I think when they get to 16 teams, just play it normal. 1 plays 16, play it out. But you'll see if we ever get there.
Yeah, to get to 16, they got to agree on a format, and there's no indication that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Why would they possibly agree? Everybody's territorial. It's just it is a complete mess, but it's great content for us.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, make sure you like and subscribe. You like that? Like and subscribe. And we will be back next week with an all-new episode. Find my work at JohnCanzano.com. Find his work at WilnerHotline.com. If you're looking for a Christmas gift, a subscription to JohnCanzano.com or a subscription to the hotline, those are great Christmas gifts for people in your family. Keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, everybody.